have a very special guest with us today. Maurice Blanks, who with two other friends founded the very famous and very fabulous modern furniture company Blue Dot. Thanks for speaking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
I feel like some folks might not realize how long Blue Dot has been around, but I think you guys began in like 1997, right?
That's correct.
So why don't you give us like a little kind of brief history of how you guys all started?
Sure. So myself, John Christakis, and Charlie Laser were college friends. As we were getting our first apartments, maybe buying our first houses, we realized that we just didn't like the offerings that were available to us in furniture. And the way we always talk about it is we say that we didn't like the things that we could afford, and we couldn't afford the things that we liked. Back in those days, so this is probably the early 90s, modern furniture was much harder to get your hands on. IKEA had 2 stores in the U.S. There was no such thing as Design Within Reach or West Elm or CB2 or any of the sort of more accessible modern furniture stores that are available today. So we essentially started the company with nothing more scientific than a hunch and a feeling that we had a need, so we thought other people must have the same need. So we started, as you said, in 97. We actually designed our first collection in 96 and launched it at the International Contemporary Furniture Fair in New York in May of 97. And luckily, it was a hit. Our booth was swarmed during the show, and a quick funny little story was we were going to the trade show the first day, and somebody in the camp said, should we have order forms? And we thought that's probably a good idea for a trade show. So we stopped at a Kinko's on the way to the Javits Center and printed up some order forms. And luckily we did that because we got a lot of orders that first show, and that was sort of the beginning of the company.
And you guys are stationed in Minneapolis, correct?
That's right.
Why that city? Why not, like the bigger cities like New York or Los Angeles? Not that Minneapolis isn't wonderful.
We were all over the country. So as I said, we went to college together, and then we were all in different places, actually. We traveled together for a year after college. I think that was probably when we first sort of hatched the idea of really the idea was simply to do something that we love, to somehow combine our interest in art and design and be able to make a living. So we sort of went our separate ways. Charlie went to architecture school separately. John went to business school. Although he was an art major, we were all sort of involved in art in college. And it just so happened that John was living here at the time. I was in Chicago, where I had started an architecture firm. So I was a practicing architect in Chicago, and Charlie was practicing architecture in Phoenix at the time. For whatever reason, it just sort of made the most sense to start here. John was the first one to quit his job, and he was in Minneapolis. So we started in Minneapolis. So there was really no grand scheme behind it, although it turned out to be a pretty good place. We have our distribution center here, and Minneapolis turns out to be pretty accessible to the entire country. And in some respects, from a kind of a design culture point of view, it's been good because we feel like we're out of the fray a little bit. We're not in kind of the heat of the battle on the West Coast or the East Coast.
So with 3 founders, like, what is your specific role? How do you guys divvy up what needs to be done? Do you still get involved in design, or do you do mostly business stuff now?
John and I are in the company. Charlie's still on the board, but is not in the day-to-day operations. He went back to architecture, and as you might know, started a company called Flat Pack, which makes a modular home.
Nice.
He's also a practicing architect doing custom design as well. So John and I are still in the business, and we sort of divvy up most of the business between us. And then we share design. So, John handles finance and marketing and sales. I handle product development, sourcing, and operations. And then together we sort of co-curate design. So we have 4 designers on staff, and we're basically sort of doing the creative direction for them. But, as you'd guess, we're spending most of our time actually running the business.
So who do you look at for inspiration? I imagine, the great mid-century designers are probably high up there.
I think a little bit of everything. I think we look at some current design. We look at fine art. I think it comes from all places. It comes from manufacturing processes too. One of our central goals in designing is efficiency, and looking at the way things are made is really important to us. So we could be inspired by seeing a piece of equipment or understanding a new design or manufacturing process. That could inspire us as well. So I would just say it's kind of all over. Maybe first dibs, that side that you're sort of going, seeing some historical pieces that maybe aren't as well known as something that you'd find in a book on design. Sort of the unsung heroes of the 60s and 70s that nobody would recognize the name, and maybe the designer's not even attributed, but there's some detail that's inspiring in some way.
Are there any kind of new technologies you're really excited about that that are on the way? Are there any technologies that you wish would get invented because you've got these ideas that you want to use?
We tend not to be on the sort of the bleeding edge of technology. We're not doing things with carbon fiber and sort of space age technology. And that mostly comes down to sort of, our approach to pricing, our sort of reluctance to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in development on something. We really try to use sort of widely available existing manufacturing processes rather than sort of developing new ones. So, we're not really on the like I said, on the sort of cutting edge or the bleeding edge of that. But I think there are definitely occasions when we're trying to figure out how to attach two materials together, and epoxy or VHB tape or magnets come up, and we just sort of shake our heads and think, I wish there was some way that we could attach these two materials in a way that was much more efficient. But it's always, I don't know, I guess it's always a challenge to try to. I mean, it's an interesting challenge actually to try to figure out how to make something with the existing widely available processes.
Got this cool website, you've got these awesome catalogs with these kind of tongue-in-cheek photo shoots. How did the culture of Blue Dot evolve? Have you guys always been this cool?
Maybe it's more of a devolution than an evolution, but it started as just I think a reflection of our personalities, of who we were. I think we always wanted to sort of feel comfortable in the suit of Blue Dot. We didn't want to start a company that had a brand or a culture that we had to pretend to be part of that culture or part of that brand. So it sort of evolved, I think, from a combination of our design philosophy and how we thought things should be designed and made, and our sort of just personalities and the things that we like to do. We like to have fun. We like to laugh. I guess we're smart asses a lot of the time. And so I think that probably comes across, hopefully that comes across on the website and in the catalog, that, that we're just trying to have fun. Furniture, it should be fun for somebody to look at furniture and buy furniture from us. That the humor is kind of a way for people to kind of enter into the dialogue and be a part, sort of be with us, as opposed to us sort of being the high designer, looking down condescendingly to the masses that, that might be able to acquire one of our pieces. So it's just, I think there's a humility, a sense of humor. I think all those things just came from sort of who we were. And like I said, wanting to feel comfortable in our own company.
What about your house personally? Is it filled with a lot of Blue Dot products?
The house is certainly not filled with Blue Dot. That has probably more to do with my wife not wanting the house to be some sort of homage to me, that she wants to have other pieces in it. And I actually like it too. It can actually be anxiety producing to have a lot of your own furniture, because you're constantly, your taste and your opinions about your design work is continually evolving. And sometimes there's nothing more distracting than having one of your own pieces. If you have your own coffee table sitting there, and you have a group of friends over and you're trying to have a conversation, you keep looking at the coffee table wondering why the proportion of the leg is the way it is, and not really listening to what your friends are saying. In some ways, it's nice to have other designers work in your home, because it just makes you think about things differently, and you may get a little spark of inspiration. So it's not, and I wouldn't say that I have any specific designers. Unfortunately, I think the root cause, the thing that led us to start the company, which was we couldn't afford a lot of things we like, I think that still holds true, unfortunately. There are a lot of designers that, but yeah, there's some mid-century pieces. And then there's a mix of other things that may be designers that people would recognize. And then there's, again, a lot of sort of anonymous, just like a little telephone table I found at a second-hand store in Chicago half a dozen years ago. And I see that piece that just kind of makes me smile. I have no idea who designed it or what the context of its design would be, but it's just a great little piece.
What is up next for Blue Dot? I feel like you guys have been expanding in great directions. Or is there something really awesome on the horizon?
I think cereals, frozen fruits, things like that, frozen dinners. So seriously, I think we're just slowly kind of expanding in this sort of home furnishings world. We started out, our first collection was predominantly coffee tables and shelving. So things that were essentially square, rectangular, made of wood for the most part. We started moving into upholstery about 6 years ago. We moved into lighting a couple of years ago. So it's really just kind of taking small steps into different areas in the home. I think probably we'll be looking at flooring at some point, but just kind of slowly creeping into those other areas, which are actually a lot of fun. As designers, it's fun to get into different materials and different processes and kind of understanding a different kind of a different palette, I guess. So we'll obviously stay in home furnishings as much as we'd like to, be in the frozen food aisle.
Well, that all sounds amazing, and thank you very much for talking with us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
For more information about Blue Dot and Maurice, you can visit bluedot.com. You've been listening to a Two Modern Designer interview. For more fun podcasts, inspiring design posts, and design advice, check out the blog at twomodern.com.